Hi everybody, this is Denise from Foursquare Microfarm, and I've been really busy lately, and that's really good. I'm preparing yarn for spinning for an article that's upcoming, and I don't know if you're familiar with the process it takes for publication, but articles are written like a year in advance, and so this is going to be a really long process for me, but once everything is submitted and I'm free to give you more details, I'll kind of let you know how that's going to work. Okay, so anyway, I'm working with Cheviot, which you probably know is one of my all-time favorites. And while I was working with it, I had some thoughts about some questions I had been asked. Okay, first of all, a lot of times, I say that a lot, don't I? Anyway, a lot of times people ask, well, what do you do with your waste fiber? Those of you who process raw. And for the most part, I do nothing. I have bags and bags of waste fiber. I don't felt. I've tried felting. I don't felt. And also, a lot of times I'm working with fibers like Cheviot, Dorset, Suffolk, and those are known to be like nature's superwash. So they don't felt very well anyway. And so I don't do any felting. And the fibers I have really aren't good for felting. Secondly, I don't stuff things. I don't really make dolls to stuff. So that's not an option either. I suppose I could stuff dog beds if I made them, but I don't. And for me, I think the dogs would probably tear open whatever it is that I stuffed to get the wool out. They might. And third, when I'm working with raw fiber, a lot of the times what is left over is no good for anybody. Okay, so I have these bits and pieces in here, and some of this stuff I skirted out, like this right here. This is skirted out. I'm not even going to bother to process this. Okay, so we're just going to toss this over there. I'd have to be pretty desperate and low to toss this. To keep that. So there's a little bit here. I pulled it apart. Now, when I flick this, I'm going to be left with all of whatever is in this inside the leftover bits. And honestly, I don't know why anybody would want to use that. Everything that's left over is in there now. So I wind up with, and depending on what fiber I'm flicking, I wind up with short pieces that are full of vegetable matter and who knows what else. So that's not really something that I want to use for anything that I'm going to find useful. There's like a little piece here. I can flick this off. But I'm going to left with shorts, and I'll be left with all kind of junk. Let me grab the bag real quick, because when I first started filming, I could not for life of me figure out where it was. It's over here with the cat. Now, I don't like to spin short fibers. I just don't. So things that are like under 2 inches, and if I can avoid 2 inches, I would. And a lot of this stuff, you can see from the bag, it's not real short. Okay? Maybe 1.5 inches. And you could, if you just were that kind of person, you could actually do something with it. But I don't want to do anything with that. This is all the debris left over from flicking. So, no, I just don't. So I get rid of it. So there's this whole bag here. Depending on the fleece, the way I'm doing it, you could get 50-50. And this is pretty much what my fleece looks like. This particular piece right here, I'm at the bottom of the bag now. When I wash this fleece, anything that was, poop tags, I said, okay, I'm just not going to deal with. Anything that didn't come out completely perfect, but still could be picked through, I stuck it at the very bottom of the bag. So now I'm at the very bottom of the bag, and I have these pieces right here. And basically what I'm going to do is tear apart and see if I can find anything that's big and I can get rid of, so that I can find any of this I can actually use. When I pull it apart, a lot of it will fall off, and then I'll have a really good idea. See, the inside of this is good. like that. And then the VM, there's just a big piece. This will come off. And I'll just lay that on there. Any big pieces I'll pull off. They'll come out. And anything that's little and a mess, like this little cluster right here, I'll just throw that away. I throw away a lot of wool. I mean, I could mulch it, but I don't really like the way it looks, you know. And then I live in the city, so I have to be careful about city ordinances and mulching things. And they're concerned about, you know, making homes for mice and all that kind of stuff. So I have to keep that in mind. Okay, so it's just something I deal with the raw wool. I also want to talk about spinning yarn thicknesses. It's something I kind of alluded to a couple of videos ago, but I had someone ask about thickness of yarn and how to make a thicker yarn without increasing your plies. And is it possible to do that with a fine fiber? And this is Angora, which is pretty fine. I mean, it's like the finest, one of the finest fibers you get. And as you can see, this is a worsted weight 2-ply. So I spun this fiber thick enough to get a worsted weight, and actually it's probably a little heavier than a worsted weight, 2-ply, without having a ton of plies. And I also want to go into why 2-ply versus 3-ply. Okay, I'm looking here at the different plies of yarn. Okay, first of all, this is a single. Technically, a single is not a ply. Ply means that there are 2 or more, and there's only 1, so it's not a ply. I do spin singles, and I use singles for some for knitting, some for weaving. And it takes a bit of practice to spin a single that is not going to be, you know, really twisted and have a whole lot of extra twist in the yarn that's going to cause some issues in your work. And that's a whole different ball game. So we have to talk about singles again later on. Okay, so here I have a 2-ply yarn and a 3-ply yarn. And I do not spin 3-ply yarns very often. And I'll tell you why. Okay, first of all, in the 2-ply yarn, one of the reasons why I like spinning the 2-ply yarn is because it's only 2 plies. So inherently, it's going to be faster to spin than the 3-ply yarn is. Okay? So it's really nice. It adds that extra stability for the single, and it gives it more strength. So it's pretty much, for me, it's sad to say, I guess it's like a quick and dirty method. Okay? I got my nice single. Bam, throw an extra single together, and I can just go ahead and move on to the work that I want to do. The 2-ply yarn, as you can see, it's not really, I don't want to say it's not really smooth. I'm trying to explain it the way Abby explained it to me. It's not really smooth. See, it leaves like these kind of ridges onto the sides. All right, and I'll show you the 3-ply yarn so you can see the difference. See how smooth that 3-ply yarn is. No ridges on the side. So it leaves a lot of extra surface area that can be abraded. And you see how smooth the 3-ply yarn is. So it doesn't have that extra surface area. So the 3-ply yarn is going to be stronger. The 2-ply yarn tends to spread out in the garment, which is really nice for blocking lace. So if I was doing lace work, a really sturdy single or a 2-ply would kind of give me that spread I was looking for in the garment. Also, because it does have that surface area, it's grabby. So when you weave, the structure tends to, I want to say it fools better. It tends to fool a little better than the 3-ply yarn would, because of the smoothness of this 3-ply yarn. It doesn't have that surface area to grab to. So that's one of the considerations with 2-ply yarn. Okay, the thing about 3-ply yarn is that if you look at the way the fabric just kind of squeezes together. I mean, this is really full, nice, tight, very smooth, very sturdy. And for 3-ply, most of the time I don't make it because I don't need that kind of strength or smoothness, because I'm knitting things, open work, some lace, things that are not going to come under heavy abrasion. Also, I'm weaving, and weaving adds that stability that I would need to either my singles or to the 2-ply yarn. So I just don't really need the extra strength or smoothness that a 3-ply yarn would have. When I do need it is when I'm making socks. And I've made 2-ply socks. And let me tell you, not a thing that I'll do well for, especially for barn socks that are going to be worn a lot. So the 3-ply is better. And also, it's like the 2-ply, when you step on it as a sock, it kind of gives a little more, kind of flattens out more. And this is just a more sturdier kind of cushion feeling with the 3-ply. Okay, also, 3-ply sock, the 3-ply yarn, I'm sorry, it's supposed to be really good for cable knitting. Okay, so when you're knitting cables, if you want a really nice crisp cable, let me see if I have that here. I don't cable very often either. And it's not one of those things that, some people are like, I don't cable because I can't do. I just don't do a lot of cables. And so when you are making cables, and you can't really see this really good, look how flat that cable is. It's really squishy. So if you want really nice, defined cables, you're going to get that a lot better when you use 3-ply yarn. Okay, so like I said, I don't really do a lot of cabling. So the only time I really use and make the 3-ply yarn is for when I make socks. And the bulk of my work is making shawls and scarves and gloves and things like that. So it's really something I find I need. Also, I think the really, really big reason is that I can get the thickness of yarn that I want without building up plies. Okay? So I don't need a gazillion plies in order to get a bulky weight or to get a worsted weight. I just add, let me see, even in this right here, we've got more than one ply of yarn in this piece right here. And these are the loom waist. This is the loom waist from the Angora shawl that I cut off the loom waist here. Okay, so here's a really nice bulky piece here. And then right here is a heavy fingering piece. And they're both 2-ply. So I just add whatever I need to the piece, or in the drafting zone. I think I talked about that somewhere else. So I don't need to build up a bunch of plies in order to get the thickness that I need. So I just go with the quick and dirty method. All right, that's all I'm going to say, and I hope that made some kind of sense. If not, you can just type into the comments, and I'll redo this probably when I've had less coffee in the morning. Okay, there are 2 more things I want to mention. This is going to be like a really short video, the little segments here. All right, so this year Pantone's color of the year is ultraviolet, and I don't really get into those color of the year things. Well, at least I didn't till the last 2 years. I've been looking at the colors, and this is actually the first year I'm going to dye the colors because I really like ultraviolet. And there's somebody on YouTube, I got to find that video and give you the link, where I think they used Procon, I can't remember, the Jacquard, and, I forgot what the other one was. But anyway, they used 3 different dyes. They compared the violet for each one of those to see which one came closer to the Pantone color of the year. And so, I just picked up some purple dye. And actually, I have to say, I have not had good success with the purple dyes really getting me good colors. They do a lot of breaking. And she's found it out in the video too. And I want to say it was the Procon or Prochem, I can't remember what it is, that she found was the best color. So anyway, I got the purple dye, and it like broke all up into these colors. It broke into the blue, some shade of blue, and the camera doesn't really do it justice. There is some shade of purple going on here, an ultraviolet over here. There's like a lavender going on right here. Oh, you know what it is? This is ultramarine blue. That's what it is. And so it broke up into an ultramarine blue. It broke up into a lavender over here, lilac. It's like a violet over here. And then this kind of, not quite mauve, sort of influence going over here. Kind of reminds me of Venetian violet. And so this just was a big mess. But this is going to be really neat when I blend it. And I know that from experience. So anyway, this is pretty much how this is going to go. And I'm going to do a lot of dyeing as far as this ultraviolet is concerned. And you get to see how this yarn comes out. It's going to look a lot like the spiral ply yarn because, well, when you dye fiber versus dyeing yarn, you'll see. And there's a lot of times that's why I dye yarn and I don't dye fiber, because there's a lot more predictability when you're dyeing yarn versus dyeing the fiber. But you get some really neat effects from both. So anyway, look at that. Look at that color. That's just totally, completely, all the way different. So I'm waiting for that to dry, and you'll get to see this in my next video. I have to turn that. It's like super cold here. Well, actually, no, it's not quite as super cold, but it is. It was 50-something degrees, 60-something degrees yesterday, day before, and now it's back to 29. There's frost everywhere, so this is going to take forever to dry. All right, now, and what I wanted to show you is the Angora. And I was supposed to, for the fiber dyeing study group on Facebook, I was supposed to dye up different fibers so you can see how the color is totally different. Each fiber takes up dye differently. Not only that, but each group of wool takes up dye differently. So you have like the merino wools, and then you have, those are the fine wools. You have the medium wools, you have the long wools, and all those guys take up color differently. So for the down breeds, this is a Cheviot right here. The down breeds tend to take up wool, and they have like a chalky look to them. Okay, they look chalky. When you dye the long wools, they have a jewel tone. They kind of sparkle to them. And when you dye Angora does not take up dye as well as the wools do. And that's, a lot of it's because of the scales. Angora's scales are farther apart, and there are less of them. So, and they're more closed, so that they don't have, they're not able to pick up the dye because the scales are closed. Now, on the down breeds, the scales also are, there are more scales, of course, than Angora, but not as much as the fine wools. That's why these down breeds don't felt very well, because they don't have the scales open as wide as the finer breeds would. And let me grab the bag of merino to show you. Okay, so now let me just say this would be a richer color if I had dyed it a richer color, but I didn't dye it a richer color. So here's the merino. If I had a electron microscope on this bad boy, you would see that there are a lot of scales on this fiber. And the scales are very open. It's very fine fiber. If I had dyed it deep, which I didn't for this one, it would dye really deep. And it kind of shines. I don't even know if you can tell that on the camera. But it has a bit of shine to it, okay? Nice soft yarn with a shine. Okay, so it pretty much dyes the color that the dye is. Versus the Cheviot, which has the scales, which are more closed, and it doesn't take up the dye quite the same way, and it dries with a chalky kind of matte finish to it. Versus the Angora, which has very few scales, and those scales are very far apart, and they're very close to being closed, very tight together, and so it doesn't pick up the dye very well. Also, because of that, the Angora is, I want to say, to make sure I say this right, hydrophilic. Oh, I can't remember. I have to look that one up. Anyway, what it means is that it repels water, okay? If you spray an Angora coat, or you know what, think about it like even dogs that have double coats, what happens is the top surface of the coat gets wet, but the guard hairs on that coat keep the water from penetrating into the undercoat. So it's the same thing with the Angora. The guard hairs keep that water from penetrating down. So what I did with this is I just put this clump of Angora into the dye bath. I did not open it. And so you can see really clearly right here where the surface of the Angora was dyed. But as I began to pull apart the inside, no dye penetrated the inside of that. Okay? So it's all white on the inside. So I'm going to wind up with a really neat, either it's going to pale out the color because I'm blending it in with the white, or I'm going to wind up with these kind of marbly splotches, which are just really nice. Okay? Now, this is, I want to say this is French. This is French. And so what you do get is there are some places, even though this dyes up to a really light pastel because it doesn't absorb that kind of color, when it hits the guard hairs, which did dye, it kind of gives you a really nice kind of sparkly texture. Now, if this was satin, first of all, if this was satin Angora, I probably wouldn't have dyed it. Well, I mean, it was white, but I would have used a natural color because satin Angora just really has those really nice hollow fibers, and so it glows all by itself. So the satin Angora has a glow that looks a lot like when you dye the long wools in that jewel tone all by itself. So it would have been a slightly different thing with the satin Angora. But the other Angoras are going to dye to these pale kind of pastels. I mean, you can get a little deeper color, but it's still, the color looks, it's a muted color. It's generally a muted color. So, I mean, you know what? I really like the way this looks, actually. Just such a soft color. Okay, normally, I have to preface this because I know what I always say. Normally, I would not spin Cheviot and Angora together. Ooh, that's some nice crimp for the Cheviot. This is a lamb's fleece, by the way. But in this case, I am actually not spinning it for the texture of the Angora at all. I'm spinning them together because this is going to be a barn. It's going to be a barn glove for the breeder of the Cheviots. So I'm just adding this in for extra warmth. Okay. Normally, when you pair Angora with something, if you don't want to waste the Angora, you want to spin it with something that is comparable in micron count, which is kind of hard, but you want to have something that's pretty close, or else you're wasting the softness. But I'm not spinning it for the softness, I'm spinning it for the insulation. So that is the reason why I'm pairing the Angora and the Cheviot together, which are like complete barber and poles of the micron count spectrum. All right, that's it for this particular video. As always, as I'm moving through this new process, I'm still waiting for the new tripod. It'll be here in a little bit. As I'm moving through this new process, I'm always open to suggestions on what you want to see, what you want me to do. I have a lot of projects in mind. It's just I'm moving kind of slow off the holiday season. So leave me a comment. Tell me what you need. dogs as usual, you want to see pictures of Pepper, or anything like that, let me know in the comments. Visit Facebook and Instagram, and at some point I'll get my blog back together. And I thank you guys who support me, and I'll catch you later.